engineer and energy researcher with over 35 years experience in the oil, gas and electricity industries. And I hope I'm allowed to say this, Tim, but it included working with ExxonMobil and BHP. Tim was gas, sorry.
Can't change the past.
Tim was gas principal at the Australian Energy Market Operator, but for the last 12 years has concentrated on his work as an independent energy advisor. He has provided advice to thousands of customers in that period of time. Tim's deeply involved in getting the message across that fossil fuel is mostly made up of the chemical methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. One of his activities, as I mentioned, is that Facebook page, and we're aiming for 21,000 followers by the end of tonight. So thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you. Do you want me to just start then?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, just before you start, Tim, if people who have joined us wouldn't mind muting themselves, please. I don't want to sort of come in and mute you, but if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself so we don't get any distractions whilst Tim's presenting. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, this always takes me a second or two to figure out what to do. Can everybody see that and hear that? Any thumbs up? Good, okay, very good. It's always a bit of a dead end there. You're not really sure if people can actually see what's going on. All right, well, I've prepared this presentation here, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Thank you very much, of course, for the organizers for asking me to speak, because doing these community presentations, it is one thing that has kept me a bit sane during the lockdown. So thanks for that. Here's a quick outline for tonight. Whoa, 64 slides. Oh, well, we'll get through it pretty quick. And for those, if you happen to be viewing a recording of this later on, perhaps this presentation, or this outline would give you an idea of where to skip through to the presentation if you're interested in one particular topic more than another. I'll describe how gas in Eastern Australia is now expensive and will only get more expensive as production from the Bass Strait finishes up over the next few years. We all know fossil gas is a fossil fuel and impacting our climate, but do we really know just how dirty it is? The gas industry likes to talk about their business like it's some sort of growth industry, but it's not. Did you know that the demand for gas in Eastern Australia peaked in 2012, 8 years ago? It's been downhill since. One reason being that we have alternatives cheaper than burning gas to use in our homes and other buildings, in industry, and for generating electricity. And what's all this hype about hydrogen in our gas grids? That's what I have in this presentation for tonight. I trained as a chemical engineer, worked for ExxonMobil in the chemical industry in the US and Australia and around the world, then with BHP in the oil and gas business, including in liquefied natural gas, LNG. And then with the Exxon BHP Bass Strait joint venture. Later, I had a brief stint managing a coal seam gas pipeline with Gemini. In 2010, I moved on to the Australian Energy Market Operator, that's AEMO, as their gas principal, but I later led their 100% renewable energy study. And then I spent some time at the University in Melbourne, where I researched and reported on a range of energy topics. Everything I'll talk about today, I've written up in various reports and articles that are available out there on the internet. So to find out more, you just Google my name and you'll find all these articles and reports. As a volunteer, I've worn a number of hats. For example, I've volunteered with Beyond Zero Emissions as a technical advisor. I've been involved also with Lock the Gate and Environment Victoria, the ACF and that Al Gore Climate Reality Program, Friends of the Earth, Renew, and so on. And I'm happy to help out when time to time I get a call from Adam Bant's office or Tim Reed's office. Back in 2006, my wife and I started the Bayside Climate Change Action Group, and it was with Bayside that I first received formal training as a home energy advisor. And I continue working in that area today, having advised in more than 1,000 Melbourne homes so far. For that, I have a website, timforcey.com.au. But probably where I spend most of my volunteer time these days, I administer the 20,000, well, nearly 21,000 member Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Home. If you are on Facebook, you may be a member already. Every day, nearly every minute, we have members helping members to improve their homes to make their homes more comfortable and to save money and to cease their dependence on fossil gas, because gas is expensive and it will get more expensive as traditional Bass Strait supplies decline. Gas used to be cheap in Eastern Australia, but no longer, because gas is now exported to overseas buyers. In 2020, 81% of the gas produced across Australia will be exported. Here in Victoria, if we go back to the 1970s and the beginning of the oil and gas from the Bass Strait, we used to have about the cheapest gas in the developed world. Gas was essentially an unwanted byproduct versus the highly valued oil. Because the oil companies weren't allowed by the state government regulators to just throw the gas away, the oil companies had to find markets for this gas. And so we started to heat our water with gas. We heated our buildings with gas. We even thought it was a great idea outside of our gambling casinos to send great balls of flaming gas right up into the night sky. But because we now have pipelines connecting all the eastern states from Tasmania and South Australia right up to Queensland, and because the liquefied gas export plants have been up and running in Gladstone, Queensland since 2015, this has caused the wholesale price of gas to double again, and then to go up some more. This big increase in gas prices has increased our electricity prices and has been a big shock for gas users in industry, as well as for commercial building managers, homeowners, and renters, anyone who depends on gas. Now, if you're wondering if this is just temporary and someday cheap gas might come back, cheap gas isn't coming back. In fact, the price of gas might just keep climbing. These charts were published by the Australian Energy Market Operator recently. For the first time, the operators of the Bass Strait, BHP and Esso, also known as ExxonMobil, they've now let everyone in on the big secret that the Bass Strait gas fields are, after more than 50 years, finally running down. So now we see in the lower chart for winter 2025, that's just 5 winters away. In 2025, the Australian Energy Market Operator has no idea from where half of our gas is going to be coming from, assuming we continue to burn it at the rate we always have. So let me slow down a bit and go through these graphs in detail. The top chart there shows 2018. The jagged line across the top shows daily gas demand plotted over the course of a year. This is for the eastern states except Queensland. So those interconnected states, New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, of course, all that gas demand plotted is the jagged line. So you can see there's sort of a base load of gas demand all year long, and then a long peak period from June into October. That's winter gas used in buildings for space heating mostly. Last year, for example, most of the gas demand in those states I mentioned were satisfied by gas from Bass Strait and from some other smaller fields. That's that red area in the top chart. The other colors up the top, the yellow area, that shows a little bit of top-up gas coming down the pipelines from Queensland, not a lot. And the orange is some seasonal gas coming out of the underground gas storage facility located out near Port Campbell. But now let's look down to 2025 and compare it with 2018. The red, the gas from the Bass Strait and some other fields, has dropped off heaps. We see a big increase in the yellow area. In 2025, as much gas as possible is going to come down by pipeline from Queensland. But we then also see there's a big gas supply shortfall remaining. That's unmet gas demand if we keep burning gas at the pace we're accustomed to doing. To meet winter 2025 gas demand, some gas companies see this as an opportunity to import expensive gas, but I see it as an opportunity to leave this fossil fuel behind. Winter 2025 is not far away, and we can now see with this information that is no longer being kept secret by Esso and BHP, that today is not a good time to buy a new gas heater that you thought you might be using in 20 years' time. Victoria and neighboring states have been burning through Bass Strait gas for over 50 years, but now all that is coming to a close. Esso and BHP have even put their Bass Strait assets up for sale. They want to get out. So if even Esso and BHP are giving up on Bass Strait gas, maybe that is a signal that we should too. If we remain unprepared, if we don't see this risk coming and act, this will be a big shock to our energy systems. But who is talking about this? Some parts of the gas industry aren't talking about this too much because they want you to keep on buying gas heaters. because don't you worry, every fossil fuel crowd around is keen to fill this forecast gas supply gap. AGL is proposing a liquefied gas import terminal for Western Port Bay near Hastings. Viva, another company, says they'll build one near Geelong too. And another gas import terminals are planned or mooted for Adelaide, Wollongong, and Newcastle. And the gas pipeline company, APA, is happy to expand the gas pipelines that bring the coal seam gas down from Queensland. And at the Narrabri gas field in New South Wales, Santos have been given approval to drill nearly 1,000 wells in the Pilliga State Forest of New South Wales and the surrounding farmlands. And companies have been given the go-ahead to explore for and produce so-called conventional oil and gas from Western Victoria, both onshore and offshore. Supply, supply, supply. And none of this gas is going to be cheap. In fact, these schemes are likely to offer us the most expensive gas in the whole world. Of course, as I'll describe, I suggest something different. I suggest we stop losing money and stop burning gas as we always have, and instead turn to cheaper and greener options, such as heating our homes with our reverse cycle air conditioners. But more on that later. First, let's see, is gas the clean transition fuel that the gas industry says it is? Well, no, fossil gas isn't a clean fuel. In fact, it might be the dirtiest fuel. We've probably all seen the aerial photos of the coal seam gas wells in Queensland, but this image came up recently at the gas fallacy event, so I grabbed a screenshot. Over 10,000 coal seam gas wells have been drilled already in Queensland, and over 40,000, or who knows, maybe eventually, if everybody gets their way, 100,000 wells may be drilled in the coal seam gas, if this gas-happy Australian government and other irresponsible parties get their way. So to look at these wells, they look damaging enough to the naked eye from an airplane, but what can't we see in these photos? What's going on beneath that farmland, and what's going on up in our atmosphere? This slide shows some farm and forest areas of the coal seam gas region in Queensland before and then after the gas industry came to town. The slide on the right or left, depending on how you're looking at this, the one on the right shows the 150 well pads and all the interconnecting roads and infrastructure, water holding ponds and the like. That's 150 wells. Can you imagine 40,000 wells? To imagine that, you must mentally multiply this image 300 times. If we do multiply this image, well, that's quite dramatic. There are people living amongst all this gas industry infrastructure. They try to raise families and to farm and to run businesses amid all of that, or at least they did. Many people have left their homes, they got out. Some have been paid by the gas industry to leave. Lots of things are chasing people out of their homes up there. Impacts on the water supplies, noise, disruption to the lifestyle they thought they had. Here's a recent report about some of the more obvious gas just bubbling up out of the ground again in the Queensland coal seam gas fields, just as we saw 7 years ago back in 2013. But in 2020, we see it happening now in other places. A first step for the gas miners, you see, is that they pump all the water out of the coal seams so that the gas can flow. Some of the gas flows into their wells, but other gas can just go on its own way and just bubble up out of the earth. These are called migratory methane emissions. So a lot of that powerful greenhouse gas methane ends up in our atmosphere. More and more data is coming in from all around the world about just how poor a job the oil and gas industry does containing methane. Using satellites, airplanes, and drones and drive-by detectors, researchers and some community groups are working to expose what's going on with this invisible gas and this under-regulated polluting industry. Here are some images of me in the Queensland coal seam gas fields with an ABC journalist, and I also had this special $130,000 military-grade infrared camera, which was capable of seeing the release of methane gas that is otherwise invisible to the naked eye. The fossil gas industry says their product is clean, without bothering to measure or report these emissions of methane and other contaminants. Methane being a greenhouse gas that is ton for ton many times more damaging even than carbon dioxide. So if you'd like me to tell you what is the greenhouse gas footprint of fossil gas, because maybe you'd like to analyze and compare gas versus something else, is it clean, is it dirty? Well, sorry, no one can tell you what is the greenhouse gas footprint of fossil gas in Australia because no one is keeping track. The only figures we have, you guessed it, come from the gas industry. Over in the USA, where they now have something like 2 million unconventional oil and gas wells, it's so bad that you can see the methane hotspots from space with a satellite. At some stage, someone will also fly these satellites over Queensland. In California back in 2015, this incident, a blowout at a gas storage well, not unlike the gas storage system we have out near Port Campbell, this California disaster went on for 5 months until the well ran dry, releasing so much greenhouse gas that it pretty much wiped out all of California's positive climate change efforts. Fossil gas is hardly a clean choice. And here again, using methane sensing infrared technology, we see thousands of gas leaks across the streets of Boston. If you walk down your street and smell gas, this is what's going on. Fossil gas is hardly a clean fuel. I suppose the best thing about gas is that it's invisible, because if you could see it, you wouldn't use it. And actually, I suppose now I can delete this Boston slide from the presentation, because just a couple of months ago, we've seen these articles in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald about methane emissions on the streets of Melbourne and Sydney. It's a quite common situation. Back to that slide of the supply and demand situation in 2025, this red area you see there is the gas largely from the Bass Strait that's dropped off so much after 2018. But what this slide doesn't show are the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the Bass Strait gas that are increasing. See, what is happening out in the Bass Strait is that we're left scraping the bottom of the barrel. The remaining gas has a higher concentration of naturally occurring carbon dioxide than the fields that were tapped first back in the 1970s but are now depleted. There's so much carbon dioxide in this remaining gas that the carbon dioxide must first be removed before it comes down the pipe to your house. Otherwise, this gas wouldn't burn properly at your stove or gas heater. To remove this carbon dioxide, Esso and BHP spent billions of dollars constructing a special plant that extracts the carbon dioxide and vents it up into the atmosphere. You could even call this a carbon capture plant, because it is. But then what is done with the greenhouse gas? Nearly 1 million tons of it a year? Nothing. It's simply vented into the air because that's the cheapest thing to do. If someone wanted to store carbon, Esso are capturing carbon down at Longford every day, but then letting it go right up into our air, nearly 1 million tons a year. So not only is fossil gas getting dearer over time and a dwindling supply, it's also getting dirtier. So those are the risks we face if we keep burning gas. But now, let me shift gears to a bit of good news, possibly. The rising price of gas is one reason that in Eastern Australia, gas use peaked in 2012, has declined since, as shown by the blue line, and gas demand has certainly not kept up with GDP and population growth as represented by the orange line. The gas industry would like you to believe that gas is a booming growth industry, but it's not. We're well past peak gas use in Eastern Australia. Let's take a closer look. What do we use gas for anyway? All the time you hear gas is cleaner than coal, gas is cleaner than coal. When you hear that, they're talking about gas or coal for electricity generation, because that's pretty much all we use coal for. We're not burning much coal in our houses, right? But in Victoria, you can see in this table, the amount of gas burned to make electricity in Victoria is only 9% of the gas we use. The gas industry loves it when we compare gas with coal. So they say, keep doing that, because it's only standing next to coal that gas might look a little bit clean. What we should be doing is comparing gas with renewables, and we will see how dirty it is. But anyway, gas burned in Victoria to make electricity is not the main game. That's all a distraction. The main game is in buildings. That's where 60% of the gas goes, and it's pretty much all being wasted. So how much gas do we waste in buildings? All of it. Victorians spend $2 to $3 billion every year to be connected to the gas grid and to buy gas, to heat water, to heat our living spaces, and to cook. But today we have cheaper options, so quite a bit of these billions of dollars per year are being wasted. Where are the economists pointing out for us this enormous drain on the Victorian economy? In my home, for example, we heat our water and living spaces with heat pumps, reverse cycle air conditioners. We heat with those for around 1/3 the cost of heating with gas. Why would I want to use gas and spend 3 times as much? And lots of other homes can do this. Many Victorian homes now have the reverse cycle air conditioners already installed. So there's nothing to buy here. But when these were installed for summer cooling, that's why people installed them. But when the hot days are gone, too many Victorians just hide the remote control and they don't ever think about using their new aircon for heating. So in many Victorian homes, as we reported out of the University of Melbourne 5 years ago in 2015, in many Victorian homes, happily saving money and reducing gas use can be as simple as finding the heat button on your air conditioner. Perhaps you could even do that this weekend if it gets a bit cooler. If you think you need some heat in the house on the weekend, heat with your aircon. It's a heat pump. And here I'm backed up by some of our 20,000 members at My Efficient Electric Home who are heating their homes with aircons and saving money. Here are some testimonials. I'll pick one here. Jackie writes, we used our reverse cycle air conditioner this winter in Canberra, worked great, and we are on track to save $1,100 on heating costs compared to last year on gas. Very happy. That's from Jackie. So without further ado, how can you do this? How can you save on winter heating? Space heating, you have a few choices. In your home, you might have more than one option. You might have 2 or 3. Do you choose to heat your home with a gas heating system, or will you use those simple electric resistive panel heaters, those oil column heaters, fan heaters, heat lamps, etc.? Those all use electricity to heat wires in one way or another, like a toaster. Or there's a third choice. Will you push the heat button on your reverse cycle air conditioner should you happen to have one? Which of these 3 ways to heat is the best? Which is the cheapest to run? And beyond operating costs, are there other things to consider? Well, let's start with the reverse cycle air conditioner. I don't know if you have one of these in your home today, but if you don't yet, you likely will in future, because this is how most of us will be heating our homes eventually, and cooling them too, of course, as our earth gets hotter and hotter. It is now really important from a home energy point of view in Australia that people have some understanding of how these work. Forget about gas. Forget about evaporative cooling. Reverse cycle air conditioners are the future of home heating and cooling for most Australian homes. They don't all look like the what we would call that standard split system mounted up on the wall. Some models can be mounted down on the floor. Some can be hidden in bulkheads. Some use air ducts, but many don't. But with the basic unit, there are 2 parts, the inside part and the outside part. There are no air ducts connecting these 2 parts of a common split system. Rather, they are connected by small diameter copper piping carrying the refrigerant around in a cycle. So this device is sort of like a refrigerator in that it doesn't create heat. Heat pumps don't create heat so much as they just move it or pump it from one place to another. Beyond mainland Australia, these things are called heat pumps. Throughout the US and in Europe, and in New Zealand and Tasmania, they're called heat pumps. For sure, you already use one type of heat pump in your home today, and that's your refrigerator. That uses refrigerant system to pump heat that is trying to get into your food. It pumps that heat outside your fridge and back into your kitchen. Similarly, an aircon in summer pumps heat from your lounge room, and it pumps that heat to outside your house using the refrigerant system. And in winter, operating in reverse cycle, an aircon does the opposite. It can collect free renewable heat from the air outside your house. Even if it's only like 2 degrees outside, no problem. There's still heat in our air that the sun put there, that a modern reverse cycle air conditioner can collect and pump it up to the temperature you need suitable to heat your home. I mentioned free heat. And a nice thing about free heat is it's free. No one can send you a bill for it. Thus, a reverse cycle air conditioner can be the most modern and lowest cost way to heat an Australian home. The leveraging effect of the heat pump, the way it collects free renewable heat from the air outside your house, means that this device can be said to be 400 or 500% efficient. In other words, for every 1 unit of electricity you pay for and use to drive the fans and the compressors of a reverse cycle air conditioner, you can get up to 5 units of heat coming out of it. So buy 1, get 5. My wife thinks that's a good deal. So the bottom line, reverse cycle air conditioners can heat your house for as little as about 1/5 of what it may cost you to heat with these resistive electric heaters. As an energy advisor, about the lowest hanging fruit I can identify for a client is when I see in the very same room A resistive electric panel heater being used for heating, chewing up the electricity 5 times as fast as a reverse cycle air conditioner that they have mounted up in the wall of the very same room. Now, to someone from outer space, this seems crazy. A person choosing to use a heating system that costs 5 times as much. But of course, Australians buy air cons for summer cooling. And once the weather cools off, people put the remote away and never think about using it until next summer. So that's been my main message for folks over the last 5 years. Heat with your air con. But what about compared with gas heating? Isn't gas cheap? Versus gas heating, heating with your air con might cost you only 1/3 of what it costs to heat with gas. At least that's exactly what I found in our home. We stopped heating with ducted gas and instead now heat with 2 split systems, one at either end of the house, for just 1/3 the cost of what it used to heat with gas. And should you be lucky enough to have a suitable roof and solar PV panels on your roof, space heating and cooling with a reverse cycle air conditioner powered by your own solar panels can be very cheap heating and cooling indeed. And another thing to remember about gas is it's not just about the money. Victorians have died because they've been poisoned by deadly carbon monoxide gas coming from poorly maintained or poorly operated or just very old gas heaters. I visited a client recently who didn't own her own home. When I sat down though, I said, "I smell gas." And she said, "I knew it." Her partner couldn't smell it, but she could. But this was the unburnt gas we could smell, not the poisonous carbon monoxide, because you can't smell carbon monoxide. That's why it's so deadly. But long story short, this woman got the owners of her property to take the gas heating out and replace it with a reverse cycle air conditioner. If you have a gas heater, you should have it professionally checked every 2 years, and this will include a carbon monoxide check. If the gas heater you have looks rather ancient, say older than 20 years, then it may be well timed for an upgrade to an air conditioner, not to another gas heater. Air source heat pumps aren't just used for heating living spaces, they can also be used to heat water. Why not? And given the renewable energy credits and rebates on offer when you switch over to heating your water with a heat pump, this can be a very clean and cost-effective way to heat your water with an air source heat pump. This slide again illustrates how a heat pump collects free heat from the air outside your home and then pumps that heat up to the temperatures needed to heat your water. In this case, for every 1 unit of electricity you buy to run the pump's fans and compressors, you get up to 4 units of hot water coming out of it. Buy 1, get 4. Where else are you going to find a deal this good? With this leveraging effect from heat pumps, where they basically can be said to be 400% efficient, it means that this method of heating water can be cheaper than burning gas. Clearly, there's money to be saved if your home is not at all connected to the gas grid. No daily gas grid connection charges, no gas burned, and therefore no gas bill. Perhaps you already live in an all-electric home. Lucky you. If not, well, I've already mentioned heating, water, and living spaces. So what's the third thing people use gas for? Cooking. For many homes, the last thing left on the gas is the cooktop. And for that privilege of having a gas cooktop, people pay a gas bill of about $60 every 2 months, even though they use very little gas. So what can they do? Some folks I know, family members and members of My Efficient Electric Home, have come up with the scheme you see there in the photo, where they purchased a relatively low-cost induction cooktop, such as from Aldi, for $50 or $100. They plug it into the wall, no electrician needed, and there you go. Goodbye gas cooktop, goodbye gas bill. So, or you can get a proper induction cooktop if that's your situation. So we have our 20,000 members at My Efficient Electric Home seeing the savings of the gas-free home. And this slide shows our members getting rid of their gas meters altogether. But who else is talking about these advantages of all the all-electric home? Is it just us? Well, in 2018, the not-for-profit organization Renew expanded on our University of Melbourne research and talked about how an all-electric home could be tens of thousands of dollars better off than a home that remained on the gas grid. And then just recently, I spotted even the Victorian government singing the economic praises of the all-electric home, and also Choice Magazine, and even AGL. AGL have broken ranks with the other gas retailers and are now telling their customers they'd be better off not using gas. AGL rang me up and I told them all this stuff. I was quite surprised that they rang me up, but I was even more surprised they wrote down everything I said and put it on their web pages. So there you go, that's AGL. The Greens in the ACT, who helped Canberra to get to 100% renewable electricity, are acting to help Canberra homes to get off gas, as recently featured in this ABC News item. And now even some volume home builders and developers, even here in Melbourne or Victoria, they are seeing that they too can save money by not having to construct gas supply infrastructure if homes are no longer going to need it. And even kind of late to the party, even the sellers of reverse cycle air conditioners have started to talk about the wintertime benefits of using the equipment they sell. So now they're selling more equipment, but unfortunately they also have to work in the wintertime instead of only working in the summertime installing air conditioners. Overseas, in Asia, Europe, America, heating with heat pumps is a very common thing. I recall hearing about heat pumps when I was a child in the US in the 1970s. Perhaps that's why I'm so enthusiastic about heat pumps even still today. And in some European countries, they have started to realize that if we are to get to zero emissions by, say, 2050, we have the task of decarbonizing thousands of homes every single day from now until 2050. The Victorian government, they say they want Victoria to be fossil-free by 2050. State Minister for Energy and Climate Change, Lily D'Ambrosio, is aware of the mathematics around doing this because I told her, if we want to be fossil-free by 2050, it means we need to gas-free 350 Victorian homes every working day from now until 2050. Of course, we must immediately stop connecting new homes to the gas grid, and then also starting immediately, we need to decarbonize 350 Victorian homes every working day from now until 2050. This sounds daunting, but if you think about it, we've put solar PV panels on far more homes than that across Australia every working day over the last 10 years. But keeping new Victorian homes off gas and starting a campaign to decarbonize existing Victorian homes, I've not yet seen any Victorian state government policies on this. For completeness, I need to mention that decarbonizing homes isn't just about heat pumps, solar panels, and induction cooktops. We mustn't forget our home's thermal envelope. Victorian homes are notoriously bad thermal performers. Making sure your roof space insulation is really where you think it is, sealing up some drafts, improving your interior window treatments, all these things can reduce gas use or electricity use. Now, what about the industries that presently use gas? Well, heat pumps are used in industry too. Industrial scale heat pumps can be used to heat water, just as our hot water heat pump does at our home. But industrial heat pumps can also operate at temperatures that are so hot they generate steam. Here are some of the studies for gas users in industry in Australia that show how the burning of expensive fossil gas can be avoided in Australian industry if we turn to technologies such as heat pumps that are powered by cheap or even free renewable heat and electricity. However, most often when you hear the Australian government talking about gas as a transition fuel, gas being cleaner than coal, they aren't talking about gas for industry. They aren't talking about the gas that we burn in our homes. They're talking about the gas burned in Australia to make electricity. Now, we saw for Victoria how that's only around 9% of all the gas that we burn in Australia, in Victoria, is used for making electricity. But across all of Eastern Australia, it's a bigger, but still not a big fraction, 17%. So around 5 times as much gas is burned in Australian industry and in buildings compared with what is burned to make electricity. But okay, if this is what the Australian government likes to talk about all the time, let's talk about the 17%. This chart shows the electricity, all the electricity that was generated in Eastern Australia by year since about 2006, up to and including what we've seen of 2020. Starting from the bottom, you can see the brown coal, that's mostly Victoria, and then the black coal, which is mostly New South Wales and Queensland. Gas is shown as those orangey bits on top of the black coal. Blue for hydro from the Snowy and Keel with schemes, etc. And then over the last 12 years, you can see the wind in green and then yellow for rooftop solar PV and industrial scale solar PV starting to creep in. If we just look at the renewables, this is the graph we like to look at all the time. If we just look at the wind and the solar PV, we see this huge growth in renewables, which is great. And this chart focuses just on the coal. Brown coal certainly has dropped off with the closure of Anglesey and Energy Bricks and Hazelwood and 2 plants in South Australia. And the black coal is coming down a bit, but of course it's not dropping fast enough. But, and don't get excited about 2020 on the end there. That's just the year to date so far. But then here's the gas, which is a bit more complicated story. You can see that from the beginning of this chart in 2006 to around 2014, more and more gas was being burned to make electricity. As I said, gas was cheap back then, and this was one way to get rid of it. And back in those days, we thought we'd have a carbon price. And there was some logic that gas might be a transition fuel between coal and renewables, because gas is composed partly of carbon and partly of hydrogen. So when you burn the gas and you burn that hydrogen part, it doesn't make any carbon dioxide. So there was a certain combination of gas prices and carbon prices where gas could beat coal in the electricity market. But the price of gas went up after that and the carbon price went away. And now gas is the last thing you want to use to make electricity, looking at the economics, because gas is too expensive to burn. Once wind and solar is built, well, those renewables run whenever they can. And then coal is the next cheapest thing. And the last cab off the rank, no one really wants to have to burn gas to make electricity. But when, for example, a Hazelwood coal plant suddenly disappears from the scene, and if adequate wind, solar, and energy storage has not yet been built, there may be no choice but to burn expensive gas. In any case, the use of gas to make electricity across Eastern Australia peaked in 2014 and has been on a bumpy decline since. We won't go back to burning as much gas as we did in 2014 for electricity, but it will be interesting to see the interplay of gas with more renewables coming online nearly every day, countered by more coal plant closures coming up. The Australian Energy Market Operator, who has a role in planning the future of electricity supplies, has said there is no need for anyone to build any new large gas scale, no need to build any new large scale gas burning power plants, because we have enough of those already. We don't need any more power plants to make electricity from gas. So that's the gas used to make electricity, a transition fuel, yes, but not one to make any further investments in. The electricity system investment should be in wind and solar and energy storage and in the electricity transmission power lines. Now, just one last topic, hydrogen. Hydrogen made from renewable energy could play a number of useful roles in our green future. Today, we don't use hydrogen for too many things. Hydrogen is mainly made these days, not from renewables, but mostly from fossil gas by the oil refining industry for use in upgrading crude oil to petrol and kerosene and other products, as you can see on part of that slide. Hydrogen, again, made predominantly from fossil gas, is also used by the petrochemical industry as an intermediate in the manufacture of chemicals such as ammonia and in the manufacturers of fertilizers and explosives and other chemicals. And fossil hydrogen is also used in metals refining, such as in upgrading some iron ore. But looking beyond fossil fuels, it is possible to make hydrogen from electricity and water, as some of us did in chemistry class, with the byproduct being oxygen. So making so-called green energy from renewable electricity is done today and can be done today, but it's not a very economic proposition. Still, in our green future, renewable hydrogen could displace the fossil hydrogen used in chemical manufacturing and minerals refining. And beyond that, a renewable hydrogen could also be used as what is called an energy carrier, a way to turn renewable electricity into a physical chemical that then could be used in heavy transport or stored and used at critical times to make electricity. So that is the good, exciting future stuff for hydrogen. But of course, as with any good thing, there will be darker forces that try to latch on to the coattails of a good thing. And that's what these foreign-owned companies that own the gas pipes that run down your street, this is what these companies are up to. All across Australia, every distributor of fossil gas has received some taxpayer money to trial adding hydrogen to the gas grid. Why? Already fossil gas is too expensive to burn, and no one is saying hydrogen will be any cheaper to burn than fossil gas. No one, including the CSIRO, is saying hydrogen can never compete economically with heat pumps. Suggesting that we are going to want to heat our homes by burning hydrogen is absurd. So what's this hydrogen hype about then? Well, if you're a fossil gas producer or distributor, you need to have something to put on the sustainability tab on your website. You need to have something positive to talk about. So that's where hydrogen comes in. So the gas industry and their lobbyists are talking to local councils and anyone they can find, saying, don't help people switch their homes and other buildings off gas. Don't electrify industry, just wait and wait some more. And someday we will be able to supply you with expensive hydrogen. That's their strategy, so be wary of it. But in the meantime, don't wait around for what I call golden hydrogen for the rich and famous to come down the pipes in your street. Just go ahead and get your home off gas. In closing, whether it's this month or next autumn, as the weather again gets chilly, if you have a reverse cycle aircon and have never used it for heating, give it a go. And if you are on Facebook and need advice about improving your home, we'd love to see you at My Efficient Electric Home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. I wonder, Andreas has got lots of questions that I've seen. So Andreas, would you like to start the ball rolling? Oh, you'll need to unmute.
There's a lot of questions there. I don't know if we've got enough time for all of them. Maybe it might pay to come back on those for Tim.
Pick out one.
There's probably half an hour there.
What's the most important, Andreas? Go with that one.
Oh, okay. Let's think.
Or while you're thinking, Mike, did you have any questions?
Yeah, just on the industry use, Tim. You did touch it. Well, you more than touched on it. You did deal with the possibilities in industry for getting off gas. When you hear the industry people talking, you get the impression that it's nearly insurmountable barrier. So can you just indicate perhaps what's the most difficult industry to get itself off gas? I'm thinking maybe, for example, say making cement.
It's a,
or I don't know, that's a good example, but what's perhaps the most problematic industrial process to get onto renewables?
see, I like to start the story at the other end. I mean, that's kind of like saying, what's the most challenging drive we can think of for an electric car? Tell me why it's going to be really hard to use an electric car to drive all the way across Australia nonstop. So to answer your question, I'd rather say, no. Let's focus on where it's very easy for industry to get off gas and to use things like heat pumps. And that's what those studies did, particularly the one by IT Power, is they broke down all the use of gas for industrial processes in Australia, and they looked at the actual temperature that they needed. And you find a lot of industry, they need 60-degree water. Okay, we don't need to be burning gas at 1500 degrees or something to generate 60-degree water. When I was a chemical engineer, they told us not to do that sort of thing. That was bloody stupid. And the only reason you do it, we've been doing it here in Australia, is because gas was so cheap. They were trying to get rid of it because they wanted to produce the oil. So there are lots of opportunities as cataloged by those studies about how there's many easy opportunities. So food processing, dairy, wineries, those are all places where where maybe they're using gas today. They don't need to do that. They can get onto heat pumps. And so you see the whole sequence there. But, right up to making steel, et cetera, you've traditionally used some gas, but there can be other ways to do it, but it can be more challenging and more expensive if the only way to do it is like with the green hydrogen. So sure, there are some expensive, challenging bits, but goodness, if we weren't generating much electricity with gas, if we weren't heating our silly buildings with gas, if we didn't have industries, using gas to heat 60-degree water, you know what? We wouldn't be using much gas. And, we wouldn't need to be, drilling wells into Pilliga and doing a lot of other things. There'd be gas sitting on our hands because we'd have heaps of it for those, few challenging places where a bit more technological development is needed. But the main thing the main barrier for all of these industries is finance. So you may have a lot of industries that, thanks to the expensive gas they've been using for the last 5 years, they're not terribly profitable anymore. And so some of them have already gone out of business. Some more may go out of business, and they don't really have the money to be buying the heat pumps or to making the modifications that they need to do. So they need some support there. If we want to keep these businesses going, if they do make sense, that if they were running off renewable energy and heat pumps, then they could be profitable, then they should be supported, and there should be programs in place where some financing goes their way, similar to the way that you get supported financially if you want to put solar panels on your house. So we're doing a lot of that sort of support. But what about industry? If you look back at the liberal governments, even John Howard had more support for industry in this space than what we see today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Andreas, did you have that
Okay.
question?
I'll have one question. Tim, you said that gas is likely to stay very expensive. Now, given that our LNG exports to China and Japan, to the consumer in China and Japan, they're quite cheap as far as I'm aware. They don't pay that much for our gas. So why are you saying that if AGL had a gasification ship in Crib Point, why does that have to be so expensive to the Melbourne consumer?
Well, they're not going to give it away to you, are they?
No, but what if the international price is much lower than the retail price?
Yeah, but they'll say, "Oh, look, we had to spend, $1 billion building this thing down in Westernport, and we need to get our money back." So, look, it always comes down to market power. And when I was working with BHP, we couldn't give the gas away, so it was very much a buyer's market, and we cared a little bit, but not that much, because we were making money on the oil and the LPG anyway.
Yeah, so it was an unusually cheap situation before. Yeah.
And then the whole market situation changed. I mean, we always saw the ESSO management would come down from America and say, "You're giving the gas away here. It's the cheapest in the developed world. Charge more." And we're like, "Okay, we can try." But we'd come back and be like, "No, the customer said no." But then that all changed. And in fact, that was the strategy of Santos and some of the others, where they saw that if they could build these export plants, we've been exporting gas from Western Australia for a long time and from the Northern Territory, but we'd never done it from Eastern Australia until 2015. But that was part of their strategy. Maybe they could make some money by exporting the gas, which they haven't, but the side effect for them was that it tripled the price of the domestic gas so that we could all pay more for it. And so that was a win for them. So they're not going to reverse that. It all comes back to market power. So if industry can go to them and use logic such as, we've had the COVID crisis, so international oil and gas prices have gone down, so you should give us a break. And we could switch to heat pumps anyway, so give us a break. So we might see some downward pressure prices on downward pressure on gas prices. But for home use, it's not going to come close to beating a heat pump.
Yeah, I still think that a enlightened government could enforce pricing for gas.
Oh yeah.
And even if the production or the supply cost is considerably lower than what we're paying now, it could theoretically be cheaper.
Yeah, that's what you call a gas reservation policy, and they had that in Western Australia over the years. Yeah. But gas has always been expensive over there, full stop, reservation policy or not. There's not been much appetite amongst any governments for a gas reservation policy on the East Coast here. It's just let it rip sort of thing.
Current governments are terrible.
And so like Santos has said, in an effort to get this Narrabri project up, they've said, "Oh, we'll make sure this gas is only used domestically." Well, fine. If those molecules don't make it out of the country, fine, but they're still going to be sold at very high prices.
Can I ask one more question? This AGL Crib Point facility, that they're planning on putting a gasification plant on a ship, and so that I assume they buy it from Korea, the whole ship. What is the time frame that they're looking at for that being operational?
Oh, well, to fill that 2025, and maybe it's even actually a 2024 supply gap that I showed you there.
Have they already started construction? Do they?
No, that's up for big review going on right now, and I'll be presenting to the reviewers of that in December. But somewhere you can log on to the proceedings, the review, and you know, the environmental impacts and all that are being looked at.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Western Port Bay, which is a fairly special place, which with like the most southerly mangroves of anywhere in the world, and you know, a bit of an ecosystem there that's still pretty good. One of the problems with this regasification is the gas comes in on the ship at like minus 160 degrees. You got to warm it up. How do they warm it up? By pumping seawater through a heat exchanger to warm up the gas. Okay, so you're bringing seawater into the facility and chucking it back out the other side. It's a little bit colder then. That's not such a big deal. Sorry, warmer, colder.
Yeah, the seawater gets colder, yeah.
That's not such a big deal. But what they also have to do is they have to hit it with a lot of biocide. Otherwise, you know, you just get mussels growing in your heat exchanger and in your equipment. So basically, they got to kill everything coming into the ship, and that immediately gets just pumped out and chucked over the side. So, you know, that's probably one of the more significant environmental impacts that you're looking at there. But of course, you have climate change and whether it's a good idea to be investing in fossil fuel infrastructure full stop anymore.
So how much time do we have to kill it before the compensation costs to the supplier might kick in?
To kill the AGL, well, folks can get involved with the activity. You know, the Mornington Shire Council is against it. Lots of parties are against it. Folks can join in with that.
But sure, how much time? One year or?
But to stop it, well, now's the time. It's under review right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, probably. Anyone want to ask him a question? Because I've got one for him otherwise. Looking at the politics of it, I'm just wondering, Tim, exactly, you mentioned Santos, exactly whose interests is the government pandering to with this big sell of a gas-led recovery?
Look, the gas industry is in strife. They know they're the next coal. You know, so many coal companies have failed, and with the COVID, well, heck, you know, most of the fracking companies in America never made any money, so a lot of them are going bankrupt right now. But you know, this is the end game for the fossil fuel industry, and they're well aware of that. So they, you know, they've got billions of dollars that they can send the way of politicians to get things running. You know, they just want to get another few, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 years rolling with this thing, because executive bonuses get paid out. I mean, there'd be people in Santos that get big bonuses when the project gets approved, or if it then moved to the next stage and actually got built, then there's more bonuses. They don't actually have to make any profit or any money or ever pay any royalties or taxes. Most of all that LNG stuff that has been built up in Queensland has not made Shell, Origin, or Santos any money at all. All it's done is to provide more fossil fuels for Asian customers when maybe they should have been accelerating their move to renewables. And of course, it's driven up the price of our gas and electricity here. So it was dumb, and dumb pretty much, but that's the way it goes. So these companies, when they go to justify these projects, you know, they do their calculations, and they might find that the chances of making any profit are slim. But what else are they going to do? You know, they're kind of like zombies, these fossil fuel corporations, and they don't die till they die. They just keep doing the things they've always done.
Australia's got a lot to answer for, hasn't it? Tim, Peter just wanted to make a comment. Peter Whittle.
So, Tim, you may be aware, although it only came out today and others may be interested. So every year the federal government release the emissions factors for our electricity and other fuel sources, and the emissions factor for electricity in Victoria dropped by 7% this year due to brown coal generators closing and the solar and wind coming online. So it kind of reinforces Tim's point that while the emissions from gas are kind of questionable, the electricity grid is no doubt getting cleaner and cleaner every year. And it's come down by about 20% over the last 5 years.
Yep.
So that's substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look, thank you so much, Tim, for coming along. That was fascinating. We've got a record, I understand, of all this. So We're just trying to work out where we can put that, what platform we can use to push. Oh, sorry.